Let's take a second to talk about all the things that make The Last of Us on Max such a great series and a great development from the original series. Because there's always those people who are going to be critical of the remakes and the adaptations of video games, but when it comes to this TV show, I genuinely believe that at least with its second season, it definitely does a better job than The Last of Us Part 2 did. At least when it comes to making me feel any remorse or emotional attachment to these two main characters being Ellie and Joel. Because I have been a longtime fan of The Last of Us franchise for the better part of a decade now. Literally, we're approaching about 15 years, and over that course of time, I've always been in love with the world of this game, but the game honestly started to fall off for me during the release of The Last of Us Part 2, and it took a long time for me to warm up to the events of that game. I was not like everybody else to where they at some point started to see it as a masterpiece. I honestly still struggle with enjoying that game to this very day, and while I understand that the creators and the developers were going for a story that basically makes it so there are no good or evil people, there are just people that are trying to survive, I definitely don't think that's what the purpose of The Last of Us is as a franchise or a universe. And I believe that they completely shoehorned it in at the very last second in order to give us this misguided message about revenge over giving us a continuation of the story between Joel and Ellie as father and daughter surviving in this horrible world. And I feel like that's what got all of us into The Last of Us in the first place. But despite that, The Last of Us Season 2 premiere definitely does an amazing job of adapting the events of The Last of Us Part 2 in a way that honestly makes me feel a little bit more remorse for characters like Abby, since the episode literally chose to start with Abby and her group burying all of the fireflies that they found within the hospital. And I really didn't think about that, but you have to take into account the fact that all those random soldiers that Joel unalived were real people with real families too, and their losses were definitely felt and caused a great impact to others in the universe. And that's not something you can particularly recognize just by playing the game. So this is the kind of scene where the show actually does a justice to the source material by existing. I also want to take a moment just to say that I really genuinely love Bella Ramsey's performance as Ellie. I know a lot of people have been making a lot of disgusting comments about her appearance and her not really looking like Ellie does in the video game that much, but despite that, what we're looking for is acting here, and she is definitely doing an amazing job of acting out the role of Ellie. Everything from her quips to her personality and how she delivers her lines screams Ellie to me. And while there are definitely some actors that could have fit the appearance a little more, I definitely believe that the energy of Ellie Williams is present in this performance. Another performance that I actually really enjoyed here was Dina's, and even though Dina was not that significant of a character to me in the video game, the TV show counterpart has genuinely won me over so far, especially after getting to see her interact with Joel so much. And speaking of that, old man Joel is definitely doing a great job here in the show, and is going to make the impending doom that is coming towards us during the rest of the season hit even harder, because at the point in Joel's life that he is right now, he is genuinely going into his mature age very damaged yet incredibly wise, and you can still see the trauma that impacts him based upon all of the horrible things he's had to do throughout his entire life so far. I mean, most of y'all have to remember that Joel has been surviving in the post-apocalyptic world of The Last of Us for the better part of over 25 years now. So he's definitely going to be very hardened by his environment, but he's still conducting and carrying himself as a functioning member of society in Jackson. Another addition to the show that makes the impending moment sadder is the fact that Joel is currently in therapy trying to cope with all the traumatic things he did at the end of the last season. We also have the addition of Joel's nephew in this, and in this version of The Last of Us, we have Joel's nephew because Tommy and Tommy's wife had a child named Benji, I believe. And Benji is genuinely my favorite addition to the Miller family, and I believe that he should definitely become a canon part of it in the video games as well, because he's adorable and he definitely is needed in this bleak and depressing universe. And I do remember a lot of people complaining over the fact that Tommy's wife in this version of The Last of Us is a black woman, but I feel like that just goes to show you how much of the gaming community is filled with a whole bunch of incels that genuinely just like to get mad over the littlest tiniest details, even the races of irrelevant side characters, but it genuinely does nothing to harm the plot. And in fact, I would argue that it even enhances it to see such a diverse cast, especially because all these actors are killing their roles and doing even better than they were in the video. Because keep in mind, this positive review of this episode is coming from someone who absolutely despised The Last of Us Part 2 as a game, but for some reason the TV show version is definitely giving a better taste. There's also this really powerful scene where Joel's therapist tries to pry information out of him regarding his relationship with Ellie and why Ellie hates him all of a sudden, and she even goes on to ask him some incredibly disturbing questions, but she still doesn't really get to hit the mark of what Joel actually did. And I feel like this is something that is actually kind of monstrous and terrifying if you were to tell people, but in all honesty, if Joel was to be upfront and honest about what he did to save Ellie, I don't think that many people would judge him about it, especially because anybody else would do the same thing in the situation if it came to the life of their own child. So even if they were going to judge him, it's not like they would really have any right place to, because he did something that literally anyone else would do in order to save their loved one. Let's also take a moment to talk about how they handle the infected in this season, because we're going to be dealing with the zombies evolving, at least from the versions that we saw in the first season and in the first game. The very first interaction we see Ellie have is with the clicker, and we already know a lot about those guys. But one of the highlights of this episode is when we run into our first version of the infected, known as the Stalker. And I'm not gonna lie, seeing a Stalker in live action was genuinely way more terrifying than I ever imagined it would be, especially because just like Ellie tells them later on in the episode, these walkers are intelligent and they are capable of planning and strategizing to take down opponents. She's not just being stalked, she's being outplayed, and that being done to you by a non-living human is honestly one of the scariest things I can think of. Also, don't even get me started on the CGI and the special effects of the cordyceps as it grows out of the Stalker. It's genuinely disgusting, and it makes me terrified of this version of a zombie apocalypse more than any other I've ever seen in fiction. I don't know about y'all, but I would personally deal with The Walking Dead over The Last of Us any day, even though everyone is already infected, because there's something so disgusting about fungus that I just genuinely wouldn't want to deal with that, man. Just put an end to it. Another highlight of this episode that I genuinely believe is done better than the video game version was the scene at the party between Ellie and Dina where they kiss for the first time, and then some guy calls them a very bad name. This moment honestly felt shoehorned in and kind of like a SJW thing in the video game version, because at the time that it came out, and the fact that it kind of shifted the whole element and the environment of the game itself. However, in this scene here, you definitely see that Joel loves his daughter and is willing to do anything to protect and care for her, and I really like how it was handled in the TV show version, because it really does get all the emotions to a boiling point, so you genuinely see where all of our characters are in this moment. It doesn't feel so shoehorned in right here, but ultimately it reminds me that this is such a tragic story, and the ending between the relationship of Joel and Ellie is genuinely one of my least favorite in fiction, just because of how it started. None of us ever saw this coming. I don't think anyone thought that The Last of Us was a happy story and that it would have a happy ending, but I definitely don't believe that anyone thought it would ever get as grimdark and depressing and nihilistic as it did. And I really do hope they take some liberties to try and change the events of the video game in the television series, but it doesn't look like they're gonna stray that far away. They may just add things to try to make it make a little more sense versus change it up a lot. But ultimately, this first episode of the season was a very solid premiere, and I genuinely believe that even though they're adapting only the first half of The Last of Us Part 2, that this will be a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 season. I don't think that's far-fetched, especially because we know the quality has not been compromised translating from the video game to the television series so far. I'm definitely looking forward to see what else they do with this story. Make sure you guys leave a like on the video and a comment telling me how you felt about The Last of Us Season 2 premiere and what you want to see during the rest of the season, along with The Last of Us Season 3 when it finally comes out. Also, consider supporting the channel by subscribing with notifications on so you can get notified the next time I upload a video, and by purchasing some Sun God merch. The link to the website will be in the description. We also have a Discord where you can yap with us about all things nerdy all day if you want to. The link will be in the description as well. Thank you for watching. I love and appreciate you all. Sun God signing off.
I come in clutch like a genie. Don't talk unless you need me. You talk too much, you need it. All of my bitches look like models, she in love with me. When we link, it's flashing lights and cameras, got a